In the first video I made for you guys on RStudio, I gave you a couple reasons why I really like using RStudio as my development environment for R, and kind of opened up the RStudio environment and navigated around a little bit just to illustrate kind of how it works and show you how it's laid out. In this video, I'm going to go back to a point that I made in that other video where I said that the default unit of work in RStudio is the project. And one of the reasons that I really like using RStudio is that it makes it very easy to organize your R work into things called projects, and I think projects are pretty awesome. In particular, I think siloing your work, your R code into projects can make your life easy, and I think it makes it very easy to collaborate with people, and it makes it easy for the people you collaborate with. So what I'm going to do now is show you how to create a new project in RStudio. And as we go through it, I'm going to comment on some of the reasons why I think that this is a good way to organize your work. So if we bounce in here to RStudio, the file dropdown will allow us to create a new project. Okay, so I'm going to create this project in a new directory. I'll choose the location for this project as a subdirectory of a larger directory that I have set up for many of the projects that I'm using for this course, and I'll just call this new project 1. Okay, and this is going to open up a new environment, and one thing I want to show you here is if we navigate over to the file tree, so I have so this is my local directory where I'm keeping the projects that I'm using for this workshop, and I've created this new project, so it's created as a subdirectory. And if we go in here, this is just an empty shell, so we've got a place where we can start adding resources and start building the project. Okay, first thing I'm going to do in here is a pretty common step for me. I lay out a lot of my projects in a similar way. I use a data subdirectory inside the project, and I use an R subdirectory just so I kind of organize primary data and then R code that usually does some stuff with the data. And I'm going to go ahead and populate this. I'm going to populate this data folder with a CSV file. Now let's go back in here. And I've got a couple of CSV files in here, so I'll just show you how this works. I'll pick one of these. I'll use the Spotify Top 50 CSV file, and I'll drop that one into the new project, into the data directory. Okay, and so if we go back over to our project, in this lower right pane in the RStudio environment here, we can see that these changes that I just made to the project have been reflected here in the RStudio environment. We have the data folder and the R folder, and we have the Spotify Top 50 data set inside of that data folder. So now I'm going to go ahead and add something to this R folder. And so what I'm going to add is just an R script, and we'll keep it really simple. I'll do dplyr, and I'll just read in this Spotify data set. Go ahead and run it just to check that it works. Right, have to do read.csv. So we'll do that again. df, okay, so if I add Command S and save these changes, I'll save this as data analysis in the R directory for the project. And so now I've got my new project with a data file and an R script that's going to do some stuff with the data. Now at this point, I'm going to attempt a short demonstration because I made the claim that organizing your work into projects and using RStudio to organize your R code into projects makes your life easier. And I'm going to try to give you a short demonstration of that. One of the ways that RStudio projects make my life easier is that we'll notice here when I called to this CSV file that was in the data directory, I was able just to use a simple relative path to get to that CSV file, because we'll notice down here that the working directory defaults to the root directory for the project. So I'm inside of my new project 1, which means that the working directory is the root directory for that project, which means that I can access the data resources in that project using kind of a pretty simple string. And we could do something similar to what I've done here using kind of default R GUI. We could open this guy up. I could create a script that is similar to the script that I have in my RStudio project, where I load the dplyr library and then I try to read in that CSV file, Spotify top 50, but in this environment here, I can't do it the same way that I did in the RStudio environment, because the working directory is different. So I've got to make some modifications here to this file path in order to get this CSV in. So I've got to tell it exactly where this data file is that I want to use. So I could give it this really long path, and that no, it's not going to work. It's only going to work if I type it in correctly. So this is somewhat unintentional, but it's turning out to be a nice example of how cumbersome it can be to do this sort of thing when you're not in a nice clean RStudio project. Users. Right, I actually need the name of the project in here as well. So maybe this third or fourth time I'll be able to actually get the data file. Okay, so after a little bit of a struggle, I'm able to get the data file in here into the workspace the same way that I was able to in RStudio, although as you can see, it was a much easier process in RStudio. And so I think that's a nice little demonstration of one of the ways that RStudio can make your life a little bit easier. There are many, many other ways. So the last thing I want to try to talk real briefly about is this second point. I said that RStudio projects make my life easy. They also make my friends' life easy. They make life easy for my collaborators and the people that I work with. And the way that they do that is they offer me a nice way to organize my projects so that all of the resources that one would need in order to add to that project are all kind of in the same place. And that makes it much more likely that when I'm sending project resources to my friends and my colleagues to try and help with some analysis, that I'm actually going to get everything that they need in order to do that. So, you know, the project layout that I have for this project that we just created has this structure where there's a data directory, a scripts directory, which I've named R, and the data directory has a CSV file in it, and the R directory has some code in it, and that code takes some stuff from the data directory and does some stuff to it. And so if I want to share that, well, before I talk about sharing it, let's make it a little bit more realistic and add 2 more lines here. So let's make a plot of this data. So I have the Spotify top 50 data set that is in the workspace. And let's go ahead and make a plot with it. So now I have a script that is a little bit more like a piece of analysis that might get done in the real world, where there's some data. The data gets read into the workspace, and then some manipulations happen to it, and a summary is created. So this is just a data summary of one of the columns of this data set, and it's presented in the form of a plot. And so if I had this project and I wanted to share it with a collaborator, everything that they would need in order to reproduce what's done here, and then hopefully add some interesting features to the analysis, exists in a single location. And so I can send this off to a zip file or some other format and ship it off to a colleague, and they can drop it into their own RStudio project in their local version of RStudio and just start working on it. And I'll add to that one of the ways that I share my code a lot is through this cloud repository called GitHub. And a lot of the resources that you guys will be using in the workshop, or I don't know if you'll be using them or not, but a lot of the content that I've created, I've posted here on GitHub so that you guys can come in here to my GitHub page, go to these repositories where I've put all the code that we'll be going through in the workshop, such as this introductory data import module. And one of the things that I like about RStudio is that I have this data import module organized in an RStudio project. It's got its own directory, and because all of these resources are in a single place, it's very easy for me to ship that off, push it up to this cloud-based repository, and make that available to everyone, so that when you guys come in here, you can hit the download button, and this will download a zip file, and all of the resources that you will need in order to reproduce the analysis that goes on in this module will be available to you in the same format that I've organized it in my own R project.